Hey everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to my channel. My name is Micah. Today we are going to be talking about an eyeshadow palette tag, and not just any eyeshadow palette tag. No, I made this one myself. So as part of my monthly, usual content that I make, I try to do one tag every single month. And they're not necessarily my most watched videos, but I just enjoy doing tags. And I thought, why not make my own? And I've never made a tag before, so please spread the word. If you know any YouTubers, or if there are YouTubers that you would like to see do this tag, then by all means. And since eyeshadow palettes are my favorite thing, I just knew that it had to be about eyeshadow palettes, and I figured we could do it now. So what I have for you here are 15 prompts, and I've called it the ultimate eyeshadow palette tag. For me, using my eyeshadow palettes is very important. So I sort of came at it from that perspective. So the 15 prompts that I have here are sort of more in line with like how I would use makeup, if that makes sense. So let's just get straight to it because we have a lot to talk about. So the first prompt I have is the ultimate smoky eye eyeshadow palette. And I actually had two options here that I wanted to potentially talk about, but I decided to go with the one that I'm like, no, if I think smoky eye, I think of this palette. The other option I was thinking of was the Balm's Nude palette. I really like some of the burgundies that are in there for like this very sort of vintagey eye, more like 1920s, 1930s kind of look. But I think like for like a classic smoky eye, it's a bit corny, but the Naked Smoky by Decay, for a very long time, the only thing I did with this was create a smoky eye with these two shades. That was all I did with it for a very long time until last winter I sort of rediscovered this and I was able to make it work. I really found that some of the shimmers in this palette work really well for like this super sparkly look. So I ended up sort of rediscovering this in my collection, which is probably why I wanted to feature it here as well. But yeah, when it comes to like ultimate smoky eyes, I think of this palette. I don't like smoky eyes with like grays and blacks because I feel it just makes my eyes look too sunken. So I prefer to go something with a bit more gray or blue toned. In fact, a navy blue smoky eye, for which this palette is not going to be mentioned here, but it happens to be lying here because I'm filming two videos back to back. But yeah, something like these like navy shimmers that are in here with that black and navy here by Melt, like these three shades, are also really lovely. So I like my smoky eyes to have a little bit more dimension to it and not be like just blacks and grays, because I find that it's a bit boring. But yeah, these grays have a bit of a blue undertone to them, which is why I love them so much. So my second prompt is the eyeshadow palette that is like your ultimate everyday look in a palette. And for me, that would be this one, the Tartelette in Bloom. And this is a palette that nobody really talks about anymore, but if you're looking for a foolproof eyeshadow palette that will just give you a neutral look and that sort of does everything for you, try this one. This is really, really stunning. You get something that's a bit more cool toned, something that's a bit more neutral, something that's a bit more warm toned. You can stick to the different rows and you have a look in each one. However, you can also bounce around. I feel that every look I do with this is quite toned down, quite natural looking, and whatever I do with this is just never too much, which is what I appreciate about this Tarte palette so much. So that's why this had to be featured in here. Prompt number 3 would be my ultimate discontinued palette. And it hurt my soul so much when I found out that the Decay Naked 2 has now been discontinued. This is in my top 5 favorite eyeshadow palettes. In fact, it's in my top 3 still till this day. I reach for this all the time whenever I'm just like looking to do something that's very neutral. I go into my Decay Naked 2, and I know it doesn't look like super messy or super used, but I always struggle showing you this, but there's quite a few dents actually in this side of the palette, trust me on that. Like Suspect and also YDK have really deep dips in them, and this is one of the 3 palettes that I've said of that I would buy it, repurchase it as a backup if I knew it were to be discontinued, or if I ever hit pan. I did buy a backup of this. I now own a second one because I could never be without this palette. I just love the color story. I love the shades that are in here. This just works with my complexion so well. So I will not be hitting pan on this anytime soon, I'm pretty sure, but I now have one that was produced a little bit later, so that hopefully that can tie me over for like the next couple of years to come. So when this actually goes bad, because it's still fine, even though it's an older palette, it's still perfectly fine, and then I can start using the other one either when I use this up or whatever. But yeah, this is one that I gladly make an exception for, because I don't buy anything in backup apart from mascara, really, because you go through it a bit more quickly. But eyeshadow palettes, I don't have two of anything apart from this one. Prompt number 4 would be your ultimate colorful eyeshadow palette. And for me, a rainbow palette isn't necessarily my ultimate colorful palette, because rainbow palettes can be quite challenging to use, I find. So what I would like to sort of go with is a color story that really appeals to me, and that's blues, greens, and purples. So those are my 3 favorite colors to wear, and I feel that if I have to choose the ultimate palette that I feel that I currently own that just does a lot of that in one palette, it would be the Ace Beauté Oceanic palette. This of course is blue greens, it's not purples as well, but the quality of this and the shimmers that are in this and the dimension and the versatility in this just ticks all the boxes of what I love in a blue-green palette. So that's why when it comes to my ultimate colorful palette, it has to be the kind of color story that I reach for a lot. Like something like this, that's more like corally, orangey, warm toned. I like it, but I prefer something like this on myself. So that's why the Ace Beauté Oceanic palette definitely needed a mention here. So I already mentioned that I feel very differently about colorful makeup versus rainbow makeup. So that's why my next prompt is my ultimate rainbow palette. And again, I have 2 options for this, but I think I'm gonna go with the OG. I still wanna recommend the Certified Tropical Wonders palette. This is a lovely, lovely all rainbow color story that also gives you some neutrals, a white, a gray, and a matte black. It is an all matte palette, which to me, I would have liked to see some shimmer in here. That's my gripe with a lot of rainbow palettes, is that it doesn't have enough shimmer. But in terms of rainbow, if you just want something that's truly like almost perfect when it comes to the rainbow and the color scheme that you get in it, then this palette is perhaps the best one. It's also not super expensive, I find, especially if you're in Europe, you don't have to pay a lot for shipping. This is also available at Beauty Bay, so if you're an international shopper, this may be a little bit easier to get on there, but I got this on their official website and it was perfectly fine. They very often do sales. This is a lovely rainbow color story. Prompt number 6 is best value for money. And I think that value for money is something that's very subjective, because, you know, we have very expensive eyeshadow palettes, and are they worth it? You know, it's always like, Natasha Denona, is it worth it? You know, you see those videos coming up. But I feel very often value for money for me is very often when I feel that a palette outperforms its price point. So very often I don't feel that way about my Urban Decay or my Anastasia or, you know, my Natasha Denona stuff. I feel that way usually about eyeshadow palettes that are a little bit more affordable and then just like blow me away with how good the quality is, that you're like, why do you even have to spend that much money? And I would like to go in here with Zoeva. I think that if you're looking for a brand that just gives you a lot of bang for your buck, Zoeva, man. Zoeva has lovely quality. I do have to say that these color stories aren't to everyone's taste. Some of them are a bit dated, but what I love about the Zoeva is that they don't just randomly discontinue stuff. They actually keep things in their line for a very long time. It's not always going to be in stock, but especially when they're doing sales, they do a really good Black Friday sale usually. They just have really stunning quality that's not that expensive. I think my first, like this one was one of the first palettes by Zoeva that I bought, and at the time it was like $17.50. By now they're 23 euros. It may be a bit more expensive if you're in the US, I have to say. These may be a little bit more expensive, but for me these are 23 euros on their official website. I can also get this from Douglas, and these are just really nicely curated 10-pan palettes that have lovely quality, especially given the fact that these are half the price point of something like an Anastasia palette. Where I live, Anastasia is almost 3 times more expensive than this. So for me, Zoeva, really good bang for your buck. So that's why I wanted to recommend it here. But what about like your ultimate warm toned palette? And I was umming and ahhing and going through some of my palettes, and I was like, I've always said of the next palette I will be showing you that when it comes to warm tones, can we please do something like this? And it's the Saharan palette by Juvia's Place. Now this is a palette that not a lot of people talk about anymore, but when this came out, it was definitely a warm tone lover's dream. I'm not someone who loves warm tones, but I feel that this gives me all the warm tones I would personally want and need in a palette. You only get 4 mattes, which again, this is why nobody talks about it anymore. But one of those mattes is this like bright orange tone. You get a really nice like hot, like spicy orange. You get a very neutral brown, and then you get this like black shade as well. It's not a true black, it's more like a grayish black. I prefer that because I don't love blacks. But then in terms of shimmer, you get a cranberry shade, you get a copper shade, you get a bronze, you get a gold, you get a rose gold. So for me, this has all the warm tones I could possibly want in one palette. You can make this neutral, you can make this fiery, you can make this bold, you can make it glam. This has everything, so that's why I wanted to mention this as my ultimate warm tone palette. If we talk about warm tones, we also have to talk about cool tones, and I said in another video that I'm still either going to be showing you or that's already up, but I feel that cool toned palettes can be very boring, which is why I'm not showing you the Naked 2 again, because in terms of cool tones, yes, but it's very cool tone neutral, whereas I feel that cool tones can be far more exciting than just taupes and grays and maybe a black thrown in. If I had to pick, I would go with the Dark Magic by Morphe and Jaclyn Hill, and this is definitely not perfect, but in terms of color story, this is what I would like to see more brands do when it comes to cool tones. Because you get your taupe, and you get your like lighter taupe. So it's got a dark taupe and a light taupe. It has your taupey transition shade. It has a forest green. It has a teal. It has a matte forest green. Then you get a really nice dark, like cool tone, chocolatey brown. You get a black, and then this khaki green, which is of course, this is not like a true khaki because that's a bit more warm toned. I think this is more like an olive green, you could say. So I feel that the color story in this just plays together so well. So that's why when I have to pick a cool toned eyeshadow palette, this is probably one of my favorites, just because it does more than just grays and taupes and hope for the best. You know, it has more color to it. Next up, my next prompt would be the ultimate neutral tone palette. And I was going back and forth between the Tarte Tartelette in Bloom and this one, but I ultimately decided that this had to be my neutral pick. This is another one of my all-time favorite palettes. It's the Lorac Pro 3. And this is a palette that everybody hated because it was so incredibly light. I am super pale, so for me, something like this works really well. And I think that a lot of people who were trying this had like much deeper skin tones than I do, and this of course is going to turn into one big giant ashy mess on you if you have anything warm, like deeper than me. Like this is just not going to work if you're anything like darker than a light skin tone. But for me, this is one of my favorite palettes, plus it has a neutral undertone. For me, this is the first neutral palette where I felt I could use every single shade in the palette. And that was a long time coming, because very often like these like very deep shades, like the Lorac Pro 1 has this issue, and I talked about it in another video the other day, but these last 4 shades in the Lorac Pro, I can't use them because they all look black on my eyes. The Naked Smoky by Herby Decay had the same thing for me. Like very often, these really deep shades that they put in neutral palettes, if you are fair, they all just muddy together in like the same shade. Whereas with this, I feel it has the depth, dimension, the shimmers that I like, the color story that I like this just works on my skin tone so well, which is why I had to feature it here. Prompt number 10 is the ultimate indie brand eyeshadow palette, and for me, I have been thinking about this for some time, but I think one of my favorite indie brand eyeshadow palettes that I currently have is the Hasina 2 by Blush Tribe. This brand was discontinued, so you can no longer buy this. I do apologize, but I did say that my favorite color story is greens, blues, and purples. And what does this palette give you? It gives you green, blues, and purples. So when it comes to like my ultimate palette from an indie brand, and I think so far this is also one of the only palettes on the market that has done something like this. So that's why I just had to feature it somewhere. I could have picked this for the color story, but I think actually blue-green is like my favorite color story overall, because that's something that multiple brands do. Whereas this is so unique that you just know that only an indie brand could come up with a color story like this. Because if you want something unique, if you want something different, then indie makeup is usually where it's at. And I think this is a prime example. I don't understand why this brand was discontinued and why they discontinued this product. I do hope that in their rebranding, Mayali Beauty, that's what they're called right now, that they're going to do something similar so that people who missed out on the Hasina 2 can still get it, because this is just a wonderful palette. If we talk indie, then we can also talk about high-end brands, and this was one where it's like, you know how much I love Urban Decay, and I just didn't, like, I could have probably answered like Urban Decay for a lot of the prompts in this video today, but I didn't want to make it just one big Urban Decay party. And I was thinking, when it comes to high-end eyeshadow, like, what do I think has really nice quality? What do I really enjoy? And where I also feel that the color stories and there aren't any duds in any of the palettes, I think Anastasia, I think I have to go with that. It's, of course, I'm holding up the Soft Glam here because it's one of my favorites by them. I love this for the rosy tones that it has. I was very scared of this not working on me. I thought it would be too dark, too sultry. And yes, some of these darker shades on this end are very sultry on me. But in the end, I just felt that this exactly does what the name suggests. It's a soft glam palette. I love it. I love how it has those rosy undertones to it. I'm down. How about we go up one step in the price bracket and we talk about luxury eyeshadow. And I don't try a lot of luxury stuff. I'm just not, like, I pay for everything myself, so it doesn't make sense to constantly be splurging on these things. And very often luxury brands only have quads and they don't really understand color stories that well. But when there is one luxury eyeshadow palette that I can't stop raving about, and that is my Natasha Denona Gold eyeshadow palette. I love this, and I've talked about this so much, but I love this for the texture that it has. It has only 6 mattes and 9 shimmers, but those shimmers are all the different sorts of shimmers that you could possibly want in a palette. It's got duochromes, multi-chromes, really nice, like, textured kind of eyeshadows, transformer shades, things that can be used as toppers and as shimmers on the lid. More like subtle, like satiny shimmers that you can still use in the crease and make something very sort of soft and natural. This is just one of the best luxury eyeshadow palettes. And then, of course, if we talk about high-end and indie and luxury, we need to talk about drugstore. And here I struggled because drugstore eyeshadow palettes can be so hit and miss. And I was like, shall I feature an eyeshadow palette by Catrice or Essence? Because those are 2 of my favorite drugstore brands. And I was like, no. The sort of drugstore priced eyeshadow palette that blew me away in recent times is the BH Cosmetics Love in London palette. And this is one where, you know, I just like, London is like one of my favorite cities in the world, so it makes sense that I would like this, but also because it has a cooler neutral undertoned to this palette. That's one of the reasons why I like it. It's got a really nice taupe. I really like these like grayish blues over here. Like, it's really, this part of the palette is just great. It's got this, which kind of throws me off and makes me think it's a lot more warm toned than it is. It's not as warm toned, it's not as cool toned as it probably could be, but it's also not super warm. It's more like in the middle. But this is just such a great palette. I was blown away by the quality, and I now understand the hype around BH Cosmetics a little bit more. A lot of people are loving their palettes, but I was always a bit like, I'm not too sure, especially since I tried the Royal Affair last year and wasn't a huge fan of the color story. I didn't think it was very interesting, but this one ticks all the boxes for me. And we're almost there. I have prompt number 14 for you, and prompt number 14 is most underrated, like the ultimate underrated palette in your collection. And here, again, I have to go with a Zoeva palette. But Zoeva is definitely a underrated brand to begin with. I think much more people should be giving them credit for, you know, what they do and like the palettes that they have. But the On Taupe is, when it comes to underrated makeup, this is probably one of the worst. Because again, this is not something that you look at and you go like, woo, great palette. No, it is cool toned, it is neutral, it is also incredibly light. So again, if you have fair skin, this will work a lot better than when you have a deeper skin tone. I'm just gonna say it, but what makes this palette for me? So these two shades are where it's at for me. And the reason why I say that is because they look very innocent in this palette. But these are, oops, these are duochromes. And that's something that Zoeva does in a lot of their palettes. Most of their palettes feature 1 or 2 duochromes. And so I feel that they are not only underrated as a brand, but especially this palette, because nobody ever talks about it. Like, people talk about the mattes in here or anything like that, but Spun Pearl has a blue shift to it, and Shears and Voiles has like a pinky flip to it. Are they the strongest duochromes you will find on the market? No, but this palette doesn't intend to have like a super like out there kind of look for you. This is meant to be very neutral and very natural. And I just love that this is just a cool tone palette. Yes, that's a bit, it can be a bit muddy, it can be a bit bland, especially with those duochromes. You can just have so much fun and play around with it, be it as inner corner highlights or like a little pop on the lower lash line. They work really, really well. So that's why that would be my ultimate underrated eyeshadow palette. And last but not least is my ultimate limited edition eyeshadow palette. So number 15, limited edition eyeshadow palettes is not something I'm really down with. Like, I prefer things to just be permanent because I can take a long time to decide whether I want to get something or not. So for me, having something that's permanent just works a little bit better, I'm not gonna lie. But one of my favorite limited edition, if not the favorite limited edition eyeshadow palettes, is my Too Faced White Chocolate Bar. Like the On Taupe, this suffers from it being very light, and that's why not a lot of people like this. This got a lot of slack when it was released. But yeah, for me, for my fair skin tone, this just works so well. I love the color story in this. It has the peaches that I love. It has the neutrals that I love. These two shimmers and this shimmer are just stunning. The only shade I could probably do without is this like glittery black, but everything else in here works so well, and I love how you get 2 pops of like pastels to put on your lower lash line. For a fair skin tone, one of the best palettes. That's like neutrals with a twist, and that's my favorite thing, neutrals with a twist. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more by me, and I would love for you to spread the word about this tag so that hopefully some other people are doing it as well. If you're someone who's watching this and you have a YouTube channel or an Instagram, or maybe you just want to leave your pics in the comment down below, I will make sure to put the list of the prompts in the description box so you can use it for your own benefit. Let's have some fun and talk about eyeshadow palettes, because that's what I'm currently doing over on this channel. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye bye!